Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the Riptide. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think, Jamil Zainashev and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters. I'm Jamil Zainashev.
I'm Travis Gumbel.
And I'm Mike Persine, and you're listening to Brew Strong.
Special guest?
With special guest, Neil Spake.
Yes. I mean, there was a time when we had this perfectly.
You're out of practice.
Now I think we just don't care anymore.
We had either more or less beer that time. I don't know.
I'll get it. I got this.
Hey, at least I didn't mess it up this time.
Mike.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
Oh, you know who's not sorry?
Your buddy John?
My buddy John Blickman. That's right. He's got nothing to apologize for. He's got the greatest quality gear and, lots of creative, new, innovative equipment. Like my friend Jason Petra says, he's innovating your brew day. Yep. Lots of creative stuff and, great range of equipment from, the Anvil brewing stuff. It's to hardy, solid, equipment. Not a lot of extra bells and whistles, just good, brew gear. Travis, you have an Anvil equipment, don't you?
Yeah, I have the all-in-one, the Foundry.
Anvil Foundry. Good piece of gear, right?
I've got the conical.
Conical, there you go.
Anvil conical.
And he makes everything from that. He makes, the top tier stuff with all the bells and whistles if you want that. He even makes commercial grade brewing equipment for your smaller craft brewers up to, I think, 10 barrels. So good size brewing equipment they make. So check them out, blickmanengineering.com. Good folks. They really are, salty of the earth, wonderful folks that are working hard to make brewing better for everybody. So check them out. They pay for this show, so you don't have to. That in itself should make you question John Blickman's sanity. But, thank him. You can send an email to feedback@blickmanengineering.com and tell him thank you for hosting the show, because he's done it for 16 years now. So very much appreciated. All right.
I wonder if he's going to set up a feedback@anvilbrewing.com email also one day.
Well, the funny thing is, for like a year or so, I was like, email him at feedback@blickmanengineering.com. And then John pulled me aside one day and we're at a conference or something together. He goes, there is no feedback at Blickman Engineering. I'm like, whoops. He said, that's okay. He said, I set it up. He goes, that's the kind of guy he is. And then he went ahead and set up the account, the email account, so he could get all those things from you guys. And so, and he tells me he sees them and he very much appreciates every single one of them. He's like, I really, really love getting those emails. So, it makes it feel good. You do something nice. It's nice for people to, say thank you. All right. We're going to crack right off here with Andrew from Australia. He had a question. He said, my most recent batches have all gone a bit awry during fermentation, some kind of infection. I usually soak the stainless kegmenters with sodium perc, then store, then add 5 liters of sanitizer and shake, and then add wort and yeast. Something isn't right. So what do I change when hunting an infection, trying to obliterate it? Caustic, hot or cold? What ratio? Keg washer? Well, that assumes that the problem is in the keg, that the cleaning process of the keg is not sufficient and that it isn't somewhere else. I've seen examples where folks have had air blowing through their garage and it was infecting their beers. I think they put a fan up because it was so hot. And, that was a problem.
So there's a little correction there. He's using a keg mentor. A keg mentor I take as a keg-shaped fermenter.
Right. Right.
And I think that's what you meant, right?
That's what I meant, yes.
Yeah.
So, it could be, the word, between chilling, it gets chilled and before it gets, transferred, who knows? Unless
everything's soft after he's fermented. After he's boiled it, everything's soft, right? Anything soft after boiling.
Yes. Cold side is always dangerous. But to answer your question more directly, assuming it is that, the best way to handle it is, assuming it's a stainless keg mentor, hit it with boiling water. Hit it with hot water. Boil some water, fill it halfway, a little bit past halfway, with boiling water. If you can seal it up and put a little bit of gas on it so it doesn't collapse when it chills, then flip it upside down. Heat. Heat's the best way to kill off whatever's in there. Because you can use caustic, you can use the sodium percarbonate should do okay in cleaning. Some physical action. I'm not sure if your keg mentor is like a corny keg where you can reach in with your hand and maybe clean underneath the lid. If it's like more like a Sankey keg, then that's really tough. Try and make sure, some of the, that it's being scrubbed down, and then heat. At Heretic, we would ferment clean beers after doing mixed culture with bacteria and breath in a fermenter. And this isn't just an idiot talking that everything was clean. We had a lab. We tested everything to make sure that indeed our follow-on batches were clean. And the reason we were able to do that was we would heat them up. We would recirculate hot water through the spray ball and through the heat exchanger, and we would heat that water up until we could read 180 degrees on the outside of the jacketed fermenters. We knew the inside was hot.
Would you keep the same soft goods on all your CIP style valves, all your
We'd swap out all the soft materials. We had bins, red bins for all and red gaskets, and everything was red that was in the dirty, and everything was white that was in the clean. And we wouldn't mix the two. But yeah, use heat. Saying about day 4, the beer's aroma changes.
Can you consider changing O-rings maybe?
Yeah, make sure you change out all your soft goods like Travis is saying. So you can get an arm in. Yeah, just to make sure you feel around in there too, because sometimes you can feel like beer stone. That's why heat's good, because it'll kill what is ever underneath beer stone. And you can get beer stone in just by, you'll put in a cleaner, even, PBW, and then hot, and then you'll rinse it with cold water that has calcium in it, and it'll form a stone.
I'd also throw in there, might want to think about changing out or looking at the way he knocks out and what he's using to get into that keg mentor. I mean, you could very easily inoculate a beer with dirty hoses or nasty carb stones that you're oxygenating with, or
right. And anything that touches the beer after it's gotten cold, check that.
Yep.
Snap yourself off a fresh piece of hose.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully that helps. Brent was asking, what is a homebrew club challenge, competition, contest that each of you think would be fun and engaging for beginners, novice, and advanced brewers? Tell you what, I can see the smoke rising. What we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have your answers right after this.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Are you looking for a simple brewing system that's great for all grain brewing, but everything on the market seems to be full of compromises? Blickman Engineering has the answer. The Blickman Brew Easy All Grain Brewing System. The Brew Easy is a complete system with easy upgrades and a beautiful compact design, perfect for any size brewing location. At its core, the Brew Easy is built on 2 gorgeous Blickman Boilermaker brew kettles, a high-temperature March pump, and either a top-tier gas burner or the new Boil Coil electric heater. The Brew Easy adapter lid allows the pots to stack on top of each other, forming an efficient, strong, and compact brewing setup that comes in 5, 10, and 20-gallon batch sizes. Upgrade your Brew Easy system with full automated control by adding a Blickman Tower of Power temp controller, and make moving around easy with the Blickman Kettle Cart. The Brew Easy is modular. If you already own a Boilermaker kettle, you can build your Brew Easy by purchasing just the modules you need. The new Brew Easy all-grain brewing system. See it today at BlickmanEngineering.com and brew with Blickman quality on your new Brew Easy.
Learning to brew has never been so disgusting. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. Brent was asking a question before the break. He's listening live, and so he's able to ask in the comments section on the Facebook page. You know, what's a good challenge for novice to or beginning to advanced homebrewers in a club that is kind of fun? I got a couple of ideas. One is, pairing up, a novice and an advanced brewer together to, brew a beer together for, club competition. Another would be those ingredient kind of lottery things.
Yeah, the fantasy
those are kind of fun. Or, everybody's just got to use a, weird ingredient. I think one of the advantages, what's kind of fun is, maybe, you just, you write up a bunch of strange ingredients, Cocoa Puffs and, Fig Newtons and, beef Wellington and, you write these on slips of paper and people draw a slip of paper and that's what they got to brew with. And it's, the beer's got to exhibit, that as its characteristic, that can be fun. And then, it throws some randomness in there. That's a good one. You guys?
I'm not good at this. I'm more of a disengager than an engager. You've known me. I'm a jerk.
I like that idea where they pair up. I think my homebrew club, we probably need to do more of that where we're brewing as a group or as a pair and trying to get more time together as a club. That'd be really cool, I think.
What about you, Neil?
The other thing I think is kind of cool is a couple of our local clubs sometimes will have you pick a style and then everybody brews that style. Mm-hmm. And then if they do that semi-regularly, people learn styles and what goes into them. So that's real handy. Or you pick like a style, especially with Belgians. And if everyone's wanting to try like a different yeast strain or a different hop profile, make sure every pair of brewers and brewer does something slightly different to the same base recipe. And then you get to learn about the flavor of this yeast versus that yeast, depending on the consistency of the brewers. But
it being the holidays, okay. The white elephant where, you draw the numbers and then there's a bunch of slips of paper or whatever they would be, or little, you can do it with cups or something, pint glasses that have a style name on the bottom of them. And the first person goes up and picks one, announces it to everybody, and then, somebody could steal that style or pick a different one.
I like that.
Right?
That's cool.
White elephant, brewing color.
Now going back to you saying earlier, white elephant with a mystery ingredient.
with a mystery ingredient. There you go. That's nice. I like these ideas. Or how about kind of, Secret Santa, where you get somebody's name and then you give them the style that they got to brew with and the secret ingredient or something.
The one they hate.
Right.
The hazy IPA recipe.
Or maybe you have to give them the ingredient too. You have to buy it yourself. So it's not some crazy. So if it's expensive,
I'm going to ship Neil a pound of Mosaic tomorrow from an unknown address.
Mosaic's fine. Just don't put it in a cloudy beer.
All right. Well, I think that was some very creative ideas. I think we ought to write a magazine article using all these wonderful ideas.
I really like that white elephant concept because that is actually fun.
Yeah, that would be fun. Because again, you can steal and, let's get that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be good. All right. Matus asks, hi all, I would like to know what is your opinion about low oxygen brewing? I've come across this concept just lately. It's not present among the Polish home brewing community. Is it worth the effort to keep oxygen out of the hot process as much as possible? What are your recommendations about this? Of course, keeping oxygen out of the finished beer is crucial, but what about mashing and boiling?
I think it was I don't remember which show it was, but Bamforth did we talked about this and how I even did an impersonation of him. He was my professor at Davis for brewing science. And he talks about it and he gets into the organic chemistry of what's happening when, lipoxidase interacts with oxygen. And you are changing the beer, but at the end of the day, all of the stuff he explained is there is no noticeable difference.
It does not matter
in brewing. Yeah, it does not. I mean, he said you probably shouldn't go out of your way to oxygenate, but you don't need to worry about it either.
Well, and you look at, the German brewers. So I was in Dusseldorf and several of them use one of those cascade chillers where it's a series of tubes, like a copper tubes. Mm-hmm. Budweiser uses it. A bunch of most of the German brewers use this, especially the older ones, use this type of cascade thing where the hot wort goes running down the outsides of this thing and picks up a ton of oxygen. It's not a problem. During fermentation, any oxygen that's been, somehow entrained in there is going to get stripped out by the yeast. So
I'm going to give a yin and a yang if I can.
Uh-huh.
On the one side, I don't know why I care about it before I'm going to oxygenate it anyway. And on the other side, give it a shot. See if you like the results. See, the one thing I hear is you won't get the same color. So then you're going to have to decoct. You're going to have to adjust your recipe because you're not going to get as dark of a beer. So you're not going to get the same beer regardless. You're going to have to do different things. Your recipe that was one color is no longer that color. So now you have to adjust your malt. Is that what you wanted to do? Give it a shot. Let us know.
Okay. I'm not sure how we got to color and malts, but
no. The low oxygen up front is supposed to make a lighter wort. That's one of the arguments. You get a lighter wort if you keep your mash O2 free.
Yeah. I know yeast will reverse the color pickup in oxidized beer. So I don't think it's an issue at all. And then as Michael's saying, Bamforth is like, no, it's not an issue.
They did a lot of research on it, I guess, and they even know the mechanisms and what's happening, and they don't really. All of the stuff gets undone, like you said, by the fermentation. Like a good, healthy fermentation will wipe out whatever you did with oxygen. There you go.
All right. Let's see. You can send in your questions via email to brewstrong@thebrewingnetwork.com. And I'm actually, we're covering the questions that have been sent in, or we're getting on them now. It's pretty good. Clayton asks, we're all in agreement that micro-oxidation of wooden barrels benefits the complexity of long-aged sour beer, right? Yes. I have a beer souring in a 5-gallon keg, but I'm getting some decent complexity, and I think it's because I leave a 4 to 5 foot serving plastic tube Cobra tap constantly connected, and I think oxygen is permeating the hose tubing and adding to the complexity. Thoughts? Hugs and kisses, Clayton.
Right back at you, Clayton. Well, no, so the barrel age, fine, but I think you might have an opinion on the tubing. And I know Jamil has thoughts on the tubing from his diving, et cetera. And one thing he left out is the keg pressurized or not? Because if it's not pressurized, you can almost guarantee you're going to get some O2 migration in there one way or another.
Even if it is, you'll get oxygen will go across the barrier. If you're pressurizing a keg with CO2 and you have, plastic membrane there that's O2 permeable, the oxygen will go in. It's partial pressure of gases. It's not total pressure of gases. So, yes, I believe that it's possible. It would be extremely slow. One thing is silicon tubing is extremely oxygen permeable. Oxygen goes through that like a house fire. Vinyl tubing, less so. The thing is, the dip tube, that Cobra tap is attached to the dip tube, which goes to the bottom, which is stainless. And it's a long way down, and it's got just that little spot on the bottom that it's open. So I wouldn't think you'd get much. You will get some. I think the stuff in the line is probably heavily oxidized. But the stuff in the keg, I don't think you're getting a whole lot there. You probably get some across the seals in the keg, especially if you're using silicone seals. I do believe, one of the things a long time ago, I worked out the numbers on, or somebody worked out the numbers on using those plastic caps on carboys. Those plastic caps,
yeah.
They will allow just about the right amount of oxygen in to your carboy, similar to a barrel aging, similar to what they do in the large fooders and like Rodenbach. Those have very low oxygen. If you get down to like a wine barrel, it's much more oxygen. You get down to something smaller like a whiskey barrel, it's even more oxygen. You get down to like a 30 or a 5-gallon barrel, it's even more oxygen the smaller you go. Could be you're getting something, but I wouldn't think it would be much. It'd be a tiny bit. So you could get some from initial oxygen when you've transferred. Depends, but yeah, I don't think you're crazy. I think it certainly is possible you're getting some.
So Neil, do you try to replicate the cask condition when you make English ales?
Not really. And the only reason is you got to drink it.
Invite me over, man.
I don't know how that's a problem. Well, the problem. I'm just kidding.
So they open ferment, but then they encapsulate, and it's stored for a while. And I guess the modern day cask really is a stainless cask, correct?
But it's still always open to the air. So that's.
But once they put it in the pump, they open it up, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but unless you violate camera rules and use a cask breather that allows CO2 or oxygen to CO2 to come in and blanket it
right
as it's withdrawn, which is an absolute no-no to purists. You 3 days, it's got to be gone for the most part. So,
but you don't let the firkin breathe until you're ready to prep it. Until the public is ready to prep it for serving.
Absolutely.
I'm just going through some thoughts in general on you don't really see that beer doing what it does. Its magic doesn't really happen until they pop it open and start getting prepped for serving.
Yeah.
Could it be that he just has a really good set of bacteria in his keg there, making some tasty beer? I mean, how much oxygen would it take?
Quite possible.
Yeah, it doesn't take a whole lot. Micro oxygen over a long period of time. Could be, if there's a lot of temperature changes.
Forces of breathing.
It kind of expands and contracts. That could be working in his favor on that.
I don't have too many kegs that will hold a good seal at zero pressure as the temperature fluctuates. They're going to breathe.
Yeah.
My kegs, your personal.
All right. Finn is quite upset with me.
Uh-oh.
Finn says, hi. Or he says, hi. I usually love to listen to you, but this time I got a bit irritated. 1, if you don't get a good attenuation, the answer is not necessarily that you didn't pitch enough yeast. When you're a home brewer, it is actually more likely you didn't pitch yeast in good shape, or you didn't provide enough nutrition, oxygen, fan, minerals, etc. In my experience, yeast vitality is paramount. And only if you are sure that is taken care of is your pitch more yeast the answer to your attenuation problems. Well, let me tell you this. When I started talking about yeast and pitching proper amount of yeast, the thing was nobody was pitching their proper amount of yeast, or very few people were. And yes, it is 20 years later, and now I guess it is possible more people are pitching their proper amount of yeast than not pitching their proper amount of yeast. So that certainly is possible, but we still need to reiterate to new brewers that they need to be pitching enough yeast, and it's commonly one of those things. The other thing about viability and vitality of the yeast is that you can, in some ways, make up for poor viability and vitality by pitching more yeast, which is why we say that. Because a lot of brewers don't have your experience and don't, know whether yeast is viable or the vitality of yeast, or they don't have a lot of options. So they buy the yeast, it gets shipped to them, and then they got to go with what they got to go with. So that's one of the reasons we say pitch more yeast. But yes, I would agree with you. It's better. I think it's better to pitch less yeast in better health and vitality than it is to just pile on more yeast. I would agree with that.
That's one of the two things I was definitely going to say, Joe.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's.
The first thing I was going to say is, surely you didn't piss him off. I probably pissed him off, That's, yeah.
It was one of us.
I have an extension off of that. I think it goes before his number 2 if you're going to go to his number 2. But the extension off of number 1. The extension off of that is, if you're repitching, you're going to have a lot of non-viable yeast. So unless you go through quite the extensive process, you've got to pitch more of your repitch because it's aging. Every day I have yeast dying off in my container that's in my fridge right now. So I have to pitch more yeast. I'm not going to make that yeast healthier necessarily, but I am going to use more of it because some of it's dying off. I think what he's stating and what you state all the time is hand in hand.
I would agree with that. I don't think he's wrong. I don't think we're wrong. I think it's.
We did, but he's frustrated, so we have to assuage his frustration.
Well, the last gentleman gives him hugs and kisses.
Yes.
Sorry, good.
Yeah, there you go. No, what you're saying about the vital and healthy yeast, like, yeah, in a perfect world, but I think I just think that, again, with like pitching more yeast actually is a better problem to have than under pitching. So, I mean, like you've said it plenty of times where the flavor of the beer will be thrown way off if you massively underpitch compared to slightly overpitching. I mean, I think as homebrewers, I mean, I can even think about attenuation. I mean, that could be mash temp, mash pH, yeast strain selection. I mean, there's a ton of things that go into it, but I would say that, I mean, I have a tilt and I've watched it under attenuate because I was trying to stress the yeast and I went too low on the pitch rate kind of thing,
Right.
So it's, I don't know. I know I was reading this today when you sent it over and I was like, I mean, there's a ton of things, right? It's not just one.
There you go.
There's a way to kind of account for a lot of flaws in your yeast health or vitality or whatever by just slightly overpitching. And, it's.
And looking at your pitch rate, and again, I go back. I know this isn't a calculated question, but if you think you need to pitch X amount of yeast, but the yeast has some age on it, it's not that all the yeast is 75% is good. It's that maybe 25% is no good and 75% is good. So you got to pitch a little more. Anyway.
Well, if you're using like Boddingtons, that's, if you don't oxygenate it right. Like,
okay.
There you go.
All right. You got a bunch to cover here. Number 2, Dr. Maria Montsloglu's experiments at Sierra Nevada, where with starters. I don't know where this, I don't recall referring to this at all. At Sierra Nevada, we were with starters that were below the Crabtree level. I think she used an OG of 1.08 and constant oxygen feed. That's more or less how they grow dry yeast, I think. Yes. The yeast will then respire, not ferment, and it will get a lot more energy out of the sugar. Consequently, you are able to grow a lot more cells, but that takes a lot of nitrogen, and there's not much of that in a 1.08 starter. So she had to feed them quite ridiculous amounts of free amino nitrogen. I'm not sure what she used, but it was organic dead cells, not DAP, diammonium phosphate. The point actually was not primarily to grow more cells, but to grow cells that were more healthy and which would give better attenuation, and it seems it did. I've tried it and it works, though I'm not sure I want that increased attenuation. At least most of the time I don't. So I've gone back to my normal procedure. One of the things that providing the free amino nitrogen does, and any, oxygen, all these other nutrients, is so that the yeast cells can reproduce. And then also so that, they have healthy cell walls, to allow them to attenuate the beer. So it's a combination of the thing. And sometimes, just pitching more does, take care of the problem of them trying to, replicate more and having, and running up against a limit, when they do not have the nutrients they need. So it's a blend of things.
But Jamil, here number two.
Yeah.
He's talking briefly about making yeast for making yeast purposes. Yes. And then saying that he tried that and maybe he was doing it for a starter. I can't tell. Normal procedure.
We talked about something like this. There was another live Q&A where somebody was talking about keeping the yeast in the replication phase where they were respirating, not fermenting.
Right.
And I was trying to think of that. And just coming from what Brew Strong is kind of more of a homebrew show, I would think. It's like, I would be just making starters, I don't need to try to keep the yeast in a respirating to.
The reason they do that is to get more growth with less sugar because it's cheaper that way.
Right.
So they're just trying to make yeast mass.
It's an economic.
But he's saying, she did it to get like the healthiest possible yeast. So I don't know that study. I don't know that. So I really can't comment on it. As for not putting nutrients in the starter, when you grow yeast in a normal 1040 starter, spinning on a stir plate, you get a lot more growth per gram of sugar than you do in a normal brew. Yes. Hence, the need for nitrogen to build new cells is very likely to be higher than what the work can supply. Maybe, maybe not. So that's a very valid reason to supply the yeast with some extra fan. Sure. In a normal brew, it's not that vital, I think. No, you don't want to do it in a normal brew. But it still won't hurt. Yes, it can. If you
correct me if I'm wrong, Jamil.
If you add fan to a normal brew, you can end up with rocket fuel. Yes?
All of your measurements on yeast growth.
Yes.
Those were measurements, not calculations.
Correct.
Right. So when you speak of how you build up starters, et cetera, and grow yeast, it's measurements under a microscope, et cetera. Okay. Yeah.
Right. You don't want to add extra free amino nitrogen to most ferments. If you're making average strength beer, usually there's enough free amino nitrogen. You can add a little bit, but you start pushing it, you're going to ruin your beer. The yeast will really take off and you're going to get, a hot ferment. And it'll ferment out super quick. Let's see. Let me finish this. It still won't hurt. I caution against people thinking adding free amino nitrogen won't hurt. I think, though, that it might be a good idea not to add it at the start, but to wait until fermentation has reached high Kreuzen, or maybe even a little later, then there might be a shortage, and then you might want to avoid troubles towards the end of fermentation by adding a little. Found this to be beneficial, especially when brewing my Pilsners. It helps the attenuation and it helps keep the H2S levels down. Well, yeah, so there has been some studies on when you want to add free amino nitrogen. It mainly is done with wines and meads and ciders. If you add free amino nitrogen at the wrong time, you can actually stall out your fermentation. So if you add free amino nitrogen at the beginning, the yeast can kind of race ahead, and then you stall out your fermentation. Your fermentation won't complete. So there's been a bunch of studies and a bunch of papers on this. And there's a very specific time if you're going to dose free amino nitrogen. You do it, I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, I think it's 1/3 of the way into fermentation. There's a very specific time that you would add it. You don't add it later, you don't add it earlier, etc. And he says, okay, now that I've got that off my back, I once more say that I greatly appreciate your show. Keep up the good work. We listen to you here in Norway too. Well, thank you, Finn. It's very, very kind of you. Very interesting email. It sounds like you're very keen on yeast and fermentation, which is near and dear to my heart as well. So hopefully I will see you next time I'm in Norway, and we can have a couple of pints together and discuss yeast and starters and everything else. Yes?
Sorry for pissing you off again, Finn. I'll take full blame for that. It's not Jamil.
It's Travis's fault, Finn. You know that. You didn't call him out as very kind of you, because, Travis is a very delicate flower. But hey, let's see.
I just keep coming back to the reading and studying I've done is all malt worts have enough nitrogen. You don't need to add a bunch. And then when we were talking to Avi from Lallemand, he was the one that said, don't put nutrient in starters. I remember that. Because that was like, I had been doing that for years. He's like, no, you don't need to do that.
Yeah, I still put a pinch. Sorry, Avi. I should have been on the show, but no, I still put a pinch.
He just said it wasn't needed, but I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, it probably won't be the end of the world. A little pinch.
I had a little bit of zinc to mine.
Zinc, yeah, I'm just adding that. I add my zinc for my brew day. But I still use a little bit of the Y yeast because I know it's not very strong. Mm-hmm. Just the tiniest pinch on my starter.
Cheek and gum.
And my wake up work. I put a little pinch in my wake up work.
Who are you pinching? What?
Anything that won't run.
All right. Let's take another short break, and we'll be back right after this.
Back to the two guys that know how to turn beer into beer. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. Brent was asking in the chat. He said, been pondering the idea of an oat wine. Was thinking of following similar recipes of a barley wine. Thoughts? Yeah.
Never made one, but I've had one.
Yeah.
I respect the brewer, but I would advise not to do it.
How much percentage of oat was in there?
Too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think once you get past 20, 30%, probably too much.
Yeah.
It was not a very tasty beer.
If you were going to do one, I would say go with like golden naked oats or something like that.
Yeah. But you do have to be careful. I'm a big fan of, especially McClay's oat malt stout, with a famous Scottish style stout. But you got to be careful with the oats because they have such a higher fat content than some of the other. So in something as big as a barley wine, I think you'd have to go careful, or you'd have a mushy mess in the mags.
That oat malt stout, what percentage is oat malt? Is it all oat malt and they made a stout?
Here's the curious thing. When I went through the actual records from the Scottish Brewing Archive, when I was over there, it was like 20-30%. So at the time, there's a brewery in the Borders, Scottish Borders, Broughton, that brews an oat malt stout. And he's like, oh, no, you can't use anywhere near that. So I've never got a clear answer to that from a historical perspective. Some of these records are really hard to read. But yeah, you can't, just like Jamil said, you can't use much more than, I don't know, 10, 20%. You're really pushing it because it can get real gummy, even if you use the naked oats. I really like Thomas Fawcett's oat malt for this type of thing because it gives you some silkiness, but the yield on it is really, really poor. You really got to up the quantity to get any kind of benefit out of it. It's kind of fun to play with, but I'm not sure what, to get back to the question, I'm not sure if what he's thinking is, can I get some of that oaty character in an oat wine, barley wine kind of thing? It's an interesting question. It's just oats can be really tricky to work with. I think one of his pointers from doing stuff like oat malt stout is use, the rolled oats and toast them in the oven to kind of get, if you're looking for the flavor and the silkiness with a smaller quantity. But I don't know. I don't know what the actual listener is going for.
Y'all need to do a collab there, put a recipe together and make it happen.
And I actually know Brent. I could get you guys he's great experimentarian. He likes to try. He's got that send it mentality.
All right.
I remember one time he was making a beer. He threw a log in the fermenter. Just let it do its thing.
All right. Andrew asks, hi, Brew Strong crew. Thanks for doing the show and sharing your knowledge. I'm just getting back into the hobby after 9 years off because of kids. My questions are Blickman related, as I recently bought an Anvil Foundry and an Anvil Snub-Nose PET conical fermenter recently. I'll let Johnny Boy know you guys were the reason I checked them out. Thank you, Andrew. Number one, how much headspace is too much? I recently got an Anvil Snub-Nose pet fermenter, and I have no intention of fermenting under pressure. I wanted to drop my temp to clear and carbonate prior to kegging without the risk of oxygen suckback. Sounds reasonable. I'm not quite ready for a stainless conical yet. The Snub-Nose is 9.2 gallons, and I was debating doing 7.5 gallon batches or sticking with 5 gallon batches. I'm not opposed to moving to 7.5 gallons. Just wondering if you'd be concerned with 35% headspace. Too much headspace?
Well, I actually did a calculation on this one time. I was really curious how much additional CO2 would you need to make up for the change in temperature. And what I found is it's not really the headspace and like the temperature change of the gas in the headspace. It's that you're changing the solubility of the beer, and it will actually absorb a bunch of CO2 or oxygen or whatever it can get a hold of because of that cooler temperature. Gas solubility and temperature are inversely proportional. So the liquid is actually also pulling in gas. And so I actually was like trying to figure it out and like, if it's just like ideal gas law, it's not a whole lot. But then if you go, but the solubility changes in the beer can cause a lot more vacuum.
Right. Well, I think this is why he's using that, because I guess you can attach gas to it and you can keep it under.
Right. And that's what I would recommend is
pressure.
Just keep it under. Yeah. But don't just pressurize the tank and then unhook the CO2 because that's still not going to be enough with that solubility change from the
depending how much pressure you put on it, I guess. But
that's really curious, Mike, about whether or not the beer itself is pulling in more CO2 or the headspace. So it might not do them any good to fill it with more worts because it's going to pull more CO2 anyway. Now, I use a half-gallon mason jar double link system to hold my blow off to where that's what it pulls in. So I have at least a half gallon of CO2, theoretically, that's been bubbling out of my fermenter the whole time that it pulls back.
Well, I think when it comes time to chilling it down, just hook up gas to it. I think you'd be good. One of the things, fermenter headspace, I think too much is people get too concerned about that. At Heretic, we had 120 barrel conical fermenters, And the least we could put in them was, about 40, 45 barrels. The reason was the temperature probes we had to be covered. And there was a time, I think we did something where we moved a temperature probe down to the bottom and we filled one with 30 barrels or something like that. So it can be done. When the beer ferments, it is going to give off so much CO2 that it's going to flush out the headspace in that fermenter. You do five gallons in a 9.2, you're fine. It's more than going to flush all the air out of that. And that's the only thing you're really concerned about. So it'll be fine. You can do smaller batches in there. I wouldn't worry about it. And then, the guys are saying, just hook up, some gas to it so it doesn't suck back in. It should be fine. Number 2, it sounds like Travis has an Anvil foundry. I'd love to hear some tips from an advanced user. Well, if we had an advanced user.
Me too. It's a great piece of equipment. It can do anything you want it to do. I don't use it as an all-in-one. I have a separate HLT, etc. But being able to brew on electric and the volumes I want with the power I want, if it ever dies on me, and I'm like 60, 70 batches in at least, I'm going to buy another one.
There you go. Any specific tips?
Use a liquor tank?
Yeah, if you want. I mean, I'm in Blickman's Anvil. Well, it's not his group technically, but he's in there. I'm in the Anvil group on Facebook. Ask me questions there. You can find me. I don't mind answering anything. It will let you do what you want to do. You don't have to bend your rules to it.
Nice.
All right. Let's see here. Henrik, he's asking, greetings, beer wizards. He saw you waving your wands around and he thinks you're beer wizards.
Wingardium Hopiosa. Good one. That's how I make IPA. They say that 3 times.
All right. Henrik from Sweden. I'm going to Sweden in March. Looking forward to it. I love Sweden. Henrik, if you're around, you get yourself to the brewing conference in Malmo. March, I want to say 13th, 14th, 15th, something like that. I will be there. If you don't go to the conference, I'll still be at Malmo Brewing on one of those days and at the Beer Fest on that Saturday. Maybe we can meet up, have a pint. Greetings, beer wizards. Wife and I went to Prague, and while there, we visited the Pilsner Urquell Museum and Tapster Academy. We spent an hour with a professional tapster learning how to pour a Pilsner using the Czech tap, basically a ball valve, and how to produce a perfect pour. The explanation was that the correct way of pouring protects the beer from oxidation by pouring under a foam cap. This is a 3-step pouring technique as seen in the video. If you haven't seen these online, they will show you. They've got like the all foam, the partial foam, the half foam. 1, open tap slightly, 10 to 15% to pour foam. Allow some to be spilled before putting the glass under at an angle while the tap touches the glass. After 2 fingers of foam, open fully and submerge the tap under the foam to protect from oxygen, straightening as you go and fill the glass. Close the tap and remove quickly from tap to avoid any drops into the poured beer. Essentially, this is a cap-on foam technique, but for serving a pint. From my perspective, this is logical, but what do you think? Science or BS? If the science is correct, does it make any noticeable impact in reality? Regardless, I need to get one of those taps. Cheers, Henrik from Sweden.
Those are expensive taps. It could be a ball valve like he states, but they're like $300 taps.
Yeah, it's a ball valve.
Yeah.
Essentially a ball valve. But, with like brass plating and, all fancy swoopy stuff to it.
Some wood around it kind of thing. Seriously, there's a wooden section.
What are you doing with your hands there?
All kinds of stuff, man. I am working that tap.
The thing is this. foam is not the best protector of beer from oxygen. I realized running a canning line and just obsessing over dissolved oxygen levels. The problem with beer foam is it's still beer. It's every bit as liquid on the outside of those bubbles as the liquid beer is. And if it
settles back into your beer,
and then it just collapses back down into the beer. And if it's moving at all, like bubbles do, or if it's a rough surface, you're actually increasing the surface area versus just plain liquid. If you had flat, still liquid, it will pick up less oxygen than the foam, because that will all, again, it's you're increasing your surface area, which is the opposite. The opposite, it's the opposite of what you want to do. The interface is become more.
So my nucleation points / dirty glass are making my beer oxidize faster.
I just don't think there's enough worry about this. I don't think you're ruining your beer. I think.
How many days are we leaving this beer out before we drink it?
I'm telling you, man. My scientific my thought process is drink it faster.
Yes, if you're worried about oxidation of the pint, drink it faster. I think Travis is onto something here. I think it's
embrace the fact that it can open up some oxygen too.
That's another point. Talking about beers, I think this pouring thing is done more for show for the tourists than it is, like a valid, really scientific thing. I just don't think there's any scientific proof, or that it makes any sense.
The scientific proof for me is these oxidation reactions don't happen in 20 minutes, and they don't happen when you're drinking the beer. I don't, it's like,
especially if it's colder, it's going to go slow. I mean, if it was at room temperature or hot, warmed up and then, applied oxygen, it would go faster, but colder, it's going to go slower. And
we need Mike to do the calc on temperature versus how much O2 it pulls in.
Yes.
The reactions speed up, but the warmer doesn't pull as much O2 in. The colder slows it down, but it pulls more O2 in.
I just think these oxidation reactions are slow, and unless you're letting that beer sit there for 3 days, you're going to be fine.
Yes. I definitely think you certainly have an hour to drink the beer. I think what does happen in these check pouring methods is that you're breaking out a lot of CO2. And that really, it's similar in a way to, Neil, to going up, the northern part of England and using a sparkler.
Yeah.
You use a sparkler, it creates aroma, it breaks out a lot of the CO2. It comes to a softer, creamier feel. It's like doing, a Guinness nitro pour. All these same reasons. It, personally, I think it enhances the mouthfeel and the flavor of the beer. I really enjoy it. So I think there's value to what they're doing when they pour it this way. Yeah. I think the explanation is somewhat specious.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think your explanation is very reasonable. We have a brewery here in Austin, Live Oak Brewing, that does a Czech Pilsner. That's their flagship beer. And even Michael Jackson swore was on par with Pilsner Urquell. And they have one of those taps. And that's what my experience was. You tell them they'll do it 3 different ways. What I get is exactly what you explained. You get a more richness of the malt because some of the CO2 has been broken down, and a softer mouthfeel and that type of thing. So yeah, I can't speak at all to the scientific aspect of it. It definitely gives it a different texture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think the pouring's quite valid, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As a flavor experience, though, not as a protection.
I think the reason they gave you is a load of hooey.
One of the things that struck me, though, is putting the tap nozzle into the beer,
Yes.
which is a big no-no typically.
In the US, it's all food safety thing.
Yeah.
It's like we're not.
I mean, the outside of your tap ought to be as clean as the inside of your tap.
Yeah.
Or you shouldn't be serving the beer. But it's a big no-no.
I don't think it really matters if you're only putting, clean glasses up to the faucet. It becomes an issue when people have drank out of the glass and then you're refilling the glass. Then you don't want to do that. That's a big no-no. But if each glass that goes up there is always, perfectly cleaned and sanitized, I don't think putting the faucet in the glass is that big a sin. It's just something in the U.S. or a lot of people elsewhere. If you go to England, you refer back to our previous show about going to, British beer tourism. The swan neck of the cask that goes all the way into the bottom of the glass. So
come on, Mike, get a stem this big, dipping down in that glass. Come on, Mike, give me some.
Yes,
that's a big stem. It's not just the tip,
right? And so you don't want to reuse glasses in that case. Let's see here. We got time for, I think just one more. And what we'll do is we'll do that. Hey, we got two more. We'll do that after one last quick little break. We'll be back right after this.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
All right, we're back. We're doing live Q&A. We're here with our special guest, Neil Spake. Thank you for joining us for these two shows. It's been cool having you, and looking forward to our next trip together coming up to Germany. Let's see. If you're listening live, you can always ask questions in the comment section on the Facebook page. There's the live video going on. You click in the comments, you ask your questions there, and they pop up in our little window here, and we're able to see those. If you're not listening live, or if you want to ask a question that we haven't answered today, you get on to your email. You typey, and you put in brewstrong at thebrewingnetwork.com, and you ask your question. Try and keep it ideally to one question per email. It makes it a little easier for me as I'm sorting through them. When there's something with like 10 questions, I can't really get that on the air and not leave some of your questions out.
And if you're going to take issue with this, please only take one issue at a time, one issue per email.
One frustration.
If you hate us, only mention one thing you hate about us per email.
Or one of us, just me. I'll take all these.
These delicate flowers can't take one.
Oh, Finn, it's all right. It's all right. These guys are just they're very delicate. They can't take. I've had 16,
I appreciate Finn's feedback. I do.
I've had 16 years of people kicking me in the peaches. So it doesn't bother me at all. Doesn't bother me at all. I appreciate that he listens and that he cared enough to send in such a nice detailed email and to reason his reasons as to why we suck. I've just gotten emails to say we suck with no reasoning. And
suck.
No, his
we need at least a little bit.
His email was great. His email was great. No problems with that at all. Let's see here. And hopefully we'll run into him in Norway. I'll just sucker punch him.
You mean in the taxi you'll run into him? No.
Yes. All right. This one, Colin, he says, Jamil, Travis, and Michael. Oh, you got mentioned.
First time.
I did.
First time.
Holy moly. Feels like the first time. What?
I've been focusing my homebrewing efforts for the last year on making the best lager possible. I've taken a lot of your guys and others' tips, such as high pitch rates, cold pitching, and slow ramps, etc. And my lagers have improved a lot. My standard process for fermentation is to pitch 2 mil per cell per Plato at 44 degrees Fahrenheit, hold until visible corrosion Then let it naturally rise to 55 and hold until fermentation is completed. I then ramp down 2 degrees Fahrenheit every 12 hours until I'm at 34. I'll fine with gelatin and let sit for 48 hours. At this point, I dose transfer to a keg. Oh, I close transfer to a keg. Sorry. I'm getting old. My eyes don't work. Put the keg in the fridge, set the PSI to my serving pressure, and forget about it for 4 weeks. In this procedure, the lagering is done with no yeast cake and under pressure. Would lagering on the yeast cake make a noticeable positive difference on the beer? Thanks, Colin. I got a ton of stuff on this. Lagering on the yeast cake make a noticeable positive difference in beer? No. A yeast cake, the vast majority of the yeast is completely inactive, or for the most part, inactive with the beer. It is just the fine top layer that is exposed to the beer. Below it, I mean, there is some beer in there, but it's really not exchanging quickly. The yeast underneath it is pretty much, for the most part, dormant and working its way towards starting to break down over time. So this is, again, one of the reasons why Budweiser uses the beechwood chips. They boil them so they're all fluffy, spiky bits of wood, and then the yeast settles on them and they get this massive surface area. And that's what interacts with the beer and why they go through that trouble. A yeast cake, even though there's a ton of yeast underneath, it's not doing anything for your beer. So it's better to get the yeast cake out of there. You can make the transfer when there's still a little bit of yeast in suspension. It will fall to the bottom. And a light dusting on the bottom is the most that's going to be interacting with it. Let's see here. Pressure, pressure will, slow down the yeast a bit, but it's not a big deal in this scenario.
And the way you ask this question, I think you don't want to lager under pressure if you want the yeast to aid in your lagering. You don't want that thin layer of yeast slowing down.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to make that big a difference. It'll still interact. Let's see here. The more critical thing is if he's fining with gelatin and then lagering, the gelatin is taking out yeast in suspension, which could actually do things for the beer. And when that falls down, the gelatin and the yeast that you're taking out of suspension and the other particulates you're taking out of suspension falls on the bottom of the keg or whatever fermenter, is masking the yeast that are on the bottom that could do something. So that's pretty much stopping dead in its tracks what you're trying to achieve. So I wouldn't fine it before if you're going to lager and expect the yeast to do anything. One, you're taking out the yeast, and two, you're masking a yeast that's on the bottom, so it's not doing any good at that point.
Yeah, or straight past that part. I mean,
then going down 2 degrees Fahrenheit every 12 hours, that's fine. That's fairly slow. You could actually go a little faster than that until you're at 34 degrees Fahrenheit. I would either stop prior to 40 degrees. I'd stop at like 41, 42 if you want the yeast to be active. Or if you're going down to 34, you might as well go down to 29, which is, or minus 2 degrees C, 28.4 degrees Fahrenheit, which is BAM4's favorite temperature for conditioning a beer. Clarity improves head retention, a lot of different things for letting it sit nice and cold like that. The other thing, again, going backwards through this whole thing, 2 million cells per Plato per mil is a little bit more than I would generally do. I go 1.5. 2 is fine. I'd rather do a little too much than do little. But keep in mind, the more you add, the more diacetyl precursors are produced. So it could increase diacetyl.
Which is something else you didn't mention.
You are letting it rise to 55 and holding. I like that you're pitching at 44. I generally, in the first 36 hours, let it free rise to about 50, hold it for a couple of days at 50, and then I start ramping the temperature up. And by the end of fermentation, I try and get to 60 plus. And that is, every time it seems like it might be slowing down, I just raise it a degree or two. And so that I get really good attenuation, and then it consumes the diacetyl in the beer. Okay. So it sounds like you're really going, Colin, sounds like you're really going down the right path, and you're focusing on all the right things to making great lager. And I'm sure your lagers have gotten even better, but I think those small little tweaks that I mentioned could improve them the last little bit to being God's gift to lager brewing. All right. Yeah. Now that I've filled in all that airtime, what have you guys got to say?
Send us some bottles.
I would think when I make lager, I kind of have that, I guess you would call it modern, where you do the maturation rest. And so I'll actually ferment more around 50, 52. And then once I get to that, like we talked about a couple shows ago, that visible slowdown where I get to 1 Plato per day or 0.004, 0.003 points per day, I will increase the temperature slowly over a course of 2 days, but I end up 68, and I will I'll do a full maturation rest for, a week like that, or I let it finish. And then I've got to see at least 3 days of no action on the tilt. And then I'll even give it another couple days.
60, 65 degrees, in that range. I like to be.
Yeah.
Tend not to go more than 65. But I think, if you're seeing activity and you're still having to raise the temp, I see no reason not to go up to 68 either.
So if your main objective at that point in time is making sure you don't end up with diacetyl, is the yeast still going to be active at that temperature? Or, does the yeast I don't brew a whole lot of lagers. I've had Mike's lagers. They're excellent. I've had your lagers, Jamil. They're excellent. Neil hoards all his damn beer. So no. Are you, if you're trying to clean up the diacetyl precursors, at what point in time is it too warm for a lager yeast? Or that's too general because there's a shit ton of lager yeasts?
Probably 90. 95.
Okay. So yeah, you keep coming up.
Some yeasts will slow down earlier than that, but a lot of yeasts, they'll go, once you get into the mid 90s yeast, a lot of yeasts will shut down because it's too warm for them. They start to freak out.
But you're also stepping it up slowly, Mike. You're not going up to 68 quickly. So that's time to get it that warm.
It's over 2 days. I'll get up to 68, and then I'll hold it at 68 till it finishes. And I've been chasing clean, I want clean as can be, no diacetyl, no sulfur. I'm doing full 90-minute boils. I'm doing, real cold pitches. I'm doing, but then I try to finish it up warm and let it get real clean. But I know that's not the old way. And some people get really upset when they hear you make lagers like that, because you're supposed to do it kind of more the way he's doing it, where you actually will cool it down after the 55 ferment. It's I know in How to Brew, they talk about that's the traditional way of lagering.
So what do you do after you hit the 68 and it's stable and there's no fermentation? Do you crash cool it?
So I will gently cool it, and my setup, I can only get down to 40. And so then I'll rack at 40 degrees. I'll drop the yeast and rack it to I call it a pseudo bright, but it's just a 10-gallon torpedo. Okay. And that goes in my fridge at 28 or 31 or whatever I can get the fridge to. And I don't really consider it. It is a lagering, but it's more of just a physical conditioning of the beer, where I'm looking for the right clarity. I let it kind of age and settle out. And I think beers kind of open up as they sit in the keg, even without yeast in there. Or there's yeast in there, but I mean, with that Märzen that Travis had, that one was 4 weeks on the yeast, and then another 3 weeks in the pseudo bright just to clear up. And I don't use any finings. I didn't really use any fancy processes other than just time and temperature to let it get really nice and clear, get it carbonated correctly, and let the beer kind of open up, as I call it, just over the couple weeks in the keg. But some people swear that you need yeast in there. I mean, there was yeast in there, so maybe it was more like the fine dusting, like Jamil was saying. But I've always tended to, what I read about it more is that you can end up with more autolysis off flavors if you leave a big yeast cake in there for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. I'm afraid of that flavor too. So
Yeah, absolutely.
And not just autolysis, Jamil, I was thinking about, if you're stressing the yeast in general, there's a lot in those yeast cells you don't necessarily want back in your beer, not just the fact that they're dying off. So back to his question about yeast cake, which you've done a whole lot more than just answer the simple yeast cake at the end. That's a great reason not to leave it on the yeast cake.
Well, and as far as, time, I told the story before. I had a Scottish 60 shilling I had brewed, and, it dropped perfectly clear. I transferred it to the keg, chilled it, all that. And it was thin and insipid. And, the head was no head retention, giant bubbles. And, I was like, and I just left it in the fridge, and then somehow it got shuffled around, and it stayed in the back of the fridge for like a year. A year later, I'm like redoing my draft lines or replacing draft lines. I'm like, what is this keg? I'm like, oh, it's the Scottish 60 shilling. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. I should just dump that. It was no good. So I went ahead and poured a pint just to check it, and it was spectacular. It had this tremendous body to it. And it had these microfine bubbles that just the head retention, it was just like, crema on it formed and just stood, didn't move. And, it was spectacular. Sent it into competition, got, first place,
Nice.
with that. And, going up against, wee heavies and other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just because it sat there for a year, and it allowed, later on in the keg, I noticed that there was, just microfine dust at the bottom. That was, like the roast barley, just really, just the finest of dust, was down there. And, just other material had dropped out. And, there's probably some chemical, changes that happened as well over time, but it made a huge difference. There was really, if there was any yeast in there, it was very, very minimal. And, the beer just turned out great. And, time and cold can do a lot for them. The brewers in Dusseldorf, they tend to all centrifuge and filter their beer, and then they'll store it around freezing for their lagering period. They don't lager on yeast. They lager
not the yeast. Yeah, it's natural fine, the natural process of
just letting it rest. And we've all experienced where a beer rests for a while, how it improves sometimes.
Yeah, I always akin it to like a flower opening kind of thing. It's almost like the beer goes from muddled and kind of lost, and then it can really come into shape, and the flavors become pronounced and really nice and beautiful. And that's what I notice anyways with a good amount of cold storage.
I am a delicate flower. Yes. I have bloomed. I have blossomed.
I don't just have the thickest gut in the group, but probably also have the thickest skin. But anyway,
that's what I've heard. All right. Well, another great show. Thank you all for participating and helping answering these questions for our wonderful listeners. Thank you, everybody who emailed and who listened live and asked questions. We really appreciate it. Without you, the show is meaningless. So keep listening, keep asking questions. We'll keep answering. And if you have criticism, that's okay too. We appreciate those as well. You're all wonderful for taking the time to participate in the show. And hopefully we'll see you, Finn, I'll see you out in Norway, and Henrik, I'll see you in Sweden. Looking forward to it. Until then, make sure you're supporting our sponsors, Blickman Engineering. Email them feedback at blickmanengineering.com. Tell them how much you appreciate that he paid for the show so you didn't have to. Other than that, keep on brewing. Brew strong, everybody.
Brew strong.
Brew strong.